This is a short demo that shows you how to install the Akumo IRIS tool. This is a tool that helps you understand the cost for AWS for your vCenter environment, for your VMs, if you want to use it for migration DR and other things. So first you download the zip file to a Windows machine that has access to vCenter. You can go ahead and extract this to a known location. Once it's extracted, you can go into the subfolder, and there are two other folders here. One's called the scanner and the viewer. So please go ahead and deploy the scanner. So go into the scanner folder and run the setup file. So once the scanner installs, it opens up a dialog where you can provide your vCenter's credentials. So go ahead and do that. What this then does is goes and scans your entire vCenter environment, all the VMs, your storage and virtualized storage and networking infrastructure, and then it creates a file. The file is going to have a .ocft suffix, and you need to put that in a place where you can find it so that the viewer can then read it. This dialog you can skip. It asks for some contact information. And now you can go ahead and save this. I'm just going to put this on the desktop and call it that. This takes a few minutes to do for larger environments. So once you have that, let's go ahead and install the viewer. So go back into the folder, to the viewer subfolder, and run that setup file. Now, in a case where you're installing this for the first time, it may ask for a password, in which case you should use the provided password which you must have received with your zip download. So you just say go ahead and create a new OCFD file location and select that. So you find that OCFD file here, and once you read that in, it's going to show you your environment. You can give it a project name if you like. And there we go. So now the viewer has read the OCFD file and is showing you all the VMs in your environment. And so you should be able to see the names and recognize the VMs that you have. If there are a bunch of checkboxes on the left which allows you to include or exclude VMs. About the checkboxes here under virtual machine, you can go ahead and click to exclude or include virtual machines. So you can, let's say, we exclude all virtual machines first. There are a bunch of tabs up here which give you different pieces of information regarding the VMs you've selected. So let's go ahead and do that here. So in this environment, there are roughly 31 VMs. And so let's go ahead and randomly pick 4 or 5 VMs here. So I've picked 5 VMs here in this environment, and specified by default, it has a RPO in terms of protection interval of 24 hours. So that's a once-a-day protection. So you can change this if you like to multiple times a day, twice a day, or once every hour, things like that. And so let's go ahead and select, change a couple of those so that we can kind of show you what the tool does. So we selected these 5 VMs. Now, right out of the gate, what the actual tool tells you is that for these 5 selected VMs, in fact, for every VM in your environment, it automatically maps these VMs into what it needs to look like on the cloud side if you were to take these machines and, say, migrate them or move them to the cloud. So that's just some basic information it gives you up front. In addition, if you go to the top list here and you click on deltas, based on the number of VMs that you've selected here, it's going to tell you what the actual storage footprint for those VMs are. So in this case, we have a total capacity of 312 gigabytes across those 5 VMs. And so if you went in here and selected a few more VMs and went back to the deltas list, that's all it's going to change according to the number of VMs that you've selected. And it also tells you what the use capacity is and things of that nature. In addition, it gives you a way for you to kind of simulate what the change rates on those VMs are going to be. So this allows the product for the DR by Akumo to actually figure out how to kind of optimally use the network for sending data, and so that's kind of a way to simulate that in this view. In the network view, this allows you to simulate your network. So let's say that you have a gigabit network in the environment, and let's say that is 1,000 megabits per second, and let's say your last mile out of your network to AWS is roughly 60%. You can then recalculate this, and what this is telling you is that based on bandwidth throttling, which the Akumo product actually does during data protection, if your network can sustain the VMs and the change rates on those VMs that you've selected, right? So in here, this tells you that we've selected 6 VMs with a 24-hour RPO, and we have selected 2 VMs with a 12-hour RPO. And what it's saying is that based on the network that you have, this clearly can satisfy using your network to push data to the cloud. So let's go back to 100 here, and 62, and then just do a recalculate. This again will just make sure that your network can sustain those kind of bandwidth requirements for those VMs. The interesting view about costs is in the summary view. And so based on those number of VMs that you selected, again, when we go back to eligible, I've selected 8. Let's click on 2 more of them to get a round number here, 10. Go back to summary. And this is telling you for DR what your actual cost is going to be on a monthly basis for raw AWS costs and for annual basis for raw AWS costs. So now this is what you would be paying on your AWS bill if you deployed the Akumo DR solution. Akumo does not own the AWS account. It's owned by you, the customer. So the advantage is that this kind of shows you upfront what those costs are going to be for a DR use case, or even for migration or data archival if you were to so use those kind of use cases that our product supports. So right out of the gate, you can see here that for DR versus for migration, there's a difference in the pricing, and most of that comes out of the compute cost for migration versus storage cost, which is the bulk of cost for DR. And that's why DR is a fantastic use case to help you kind of bridge your infrastructure into this hybrid cloud world and start to use the cloud for DR initially, and then you can start to think about things like migration at some point in the future. But DR is a fantastic entryway into starting to use the cloud for your infrastructure. So this kind of breaks down what those costs are going to be. So the other what-if analysis you can do is, for example, say here, let me just select all the virtual machines in my environment, right? So if I want to protect everything, what's the cost going to be there for DR versus migration, right? Or what are the costs going to be for DR on a monthly and annual basis? Now, for each environment, it's going to be different because you're going to have a different amount of data that you're protecting. There are different sizes of VMs and things of that nature, but this is going to give you an extremely accurate cost of your cloud bill on a monthly basis, so that you can make decisions about your budget and everything else going forward for something like DR as a service. There's also a results view, which kind of breaks down the entire costs for licenses as well as those AWS costs, which are shown in the summary. But obviously, the license costs depend on the number of VMs that you buy and the discounts and stuff that we provide our partners and so on and so forth. So those are things that we can discuss. Other than that, there's additional information that the tool provides you that may be of interest to you. It allows you to kind of see your own network in different views so that you can kind of see what are the different IPs that are allocated across various port groups and switches. And this could be of interest for you on an ongoing basis. So the idea behind a tool like this is to use this in a routine way to kind of model your environment as your environment changes. So running this tool once a quarter should give you a really good idea of what your environment looks like on premise, and also what and how you could start to use the cloud for use cases like DR or migration going forward. I hope this helps. Thank you very much.